Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Oren. Today I'm interviewing Russell E. Welch III about D20 Tales. This was an amazing interview. I loved every moment of it and I loved diving into D20 Tales. I'll also leave the links for all D20 Tales resources down in the description of the video, and I hope you enjoy. Russell Eugene Welch III, welcome. It's great to have you.
Pleasure. Thank you. It's delightful to be here. Thank you very much for having me here. You probably honestly have seen a few episodes, so you have a little idea what you signed up for, but we'll see if you regret this choice later.
Okay, so I did see a lot of episodes actually, but we can talk about that later. You are the DM for D20 Tales. It's a fairly new production. I think a week ago, you celebrated a year on YouTube. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And also 250,000 views. So in 1 year, that's impressive. So I want to talk to you. I have a lot of questions for you about D20 Tales, about the stories, the productions. But before we go there, I want to take you back to before this entire thing started. I have seen that D20 Tales is a fairly new name. It used to be called Spawn of Chaos.
Yep.
And I want to talk to you about Russell before Spawn of Chaos. What can you tell us? What can you tell us about Russell back then? Who was Russell?
Who was Russell? That is a fairly broad and enigmatic question, so let me just insert whatever answer I want to in there. Who was Russell before that? I would say the similar bundle of chaos, energy, hyperactive. I like to think highly creative or eccentric, but others could just say crazy and bonkers individual that I've always been. This has just given me a new direction to channel it in, but I've always been someone who's obsessed with storytelling. I've loved connecting with people through storytelling and the relationships that it forms, the people you can work with, and the process of creating something with other people who are super passionate about creating something.
Amazing. What were your inspirations like for stories, for storytelling in general? Like what books did you read? What movies were you inspired by? Like in your beginning?
Great question. A lot of them. I watch movies and read books across genres and across the ages. I've read books that are thousands of years old from mythology all across the globe. I love to draw a lot from ancient mythology from all sorts of different cultures. The more obscure, the more interesting I find it. I don't know why, but I just like obscure mythology. But I also just love modern fiction too. And in the spirit of a true artist, I just steal a little tiny bit from absolutely everything all of the time.
That's amazing. Can you give an example of something that you stole?
Can't try to think of something that I didn't steal. An example of something that I stole. I would say, here's something a little bit philosophical and enigmatic, but the entire underlying, like driving, I guess you could say, philosophical angle of the story and the world and the way it's told comes from the place of actually like I don't know if you're familiar with like historical sites like Göbekli Tepe, but other places like that, like places that are old prehistoric, but places like that in the world, like reading about and researching places like that in the world just made me sit and wonder and think what it would be like to live in that time period and look up at the stars and look up at the sky and look at the forest in the dark and wonder, like, is the wind a spirit? Are the stars deities? Like what forces are moving nature in the world, and not understanding these things and just having a question and having to fill that question with an answer. And I just love the concept of taking a world like that and discovering it and learning things about it, gradually unwrapping layers and layers and layers. And I want to come at it from the angle of what if your fears are founded? What if the things that we're afraid of in the dark are really there? What if they're worse than we expected? What if what we've been told isn't the truth because the truth is worse? What happens when the way we in prehistoric times imagined reality and imagined the world, and then later we didn't discover that it was far more scientifical and chemical and mathematical and researchable? We discovered that it was even stranger than we thought. And that's kind of what I want to encapsulate. And so I think the thing that I tried to steal the most, not from any specific work of fiction, but there's so many little tiny small moments in everything from Beowulf to Native American stories to the Incans and the Mayans, where they have little tidbits, little stories that paint a picture, and part of those stories, there are little tidbits and pieces tucked within them that just give you a sense of wonder, but also foreboding and dread. And I just really wanted to draw on those. So I would say that's the thing that I make the most conscious effort to rip off.
Okay. That's amazing. It's like thinking that the monster under the bed is actually there, but when you go to look, you dimension doors away, and you never find it. But it's there. It exists. That's amazing. Like, a lot of insight. Okay. There is a little interview that you did with Brad about meeting the DM, I think a year ago. And in that interview, you mentioned that you wrote a lot of books, but you didn't publish them in the world of D20 Tales. And I find it very interesting. And I want to ask you, what was behind your decision to introduce the world of Gregor Shave?
Gregor Shave, yeah.
Gregor Shave.
I'm a fan of incomprehensible spellings. It's my shortcoming as an author.
So, what made you introduce that world in a collaborative storytelling campaign instead of first as a book and then doing a campaign in it?
Why not publish the novels first?
Yes.
So the answer to that's going to be far more probably exciting than people might expect. It really just comes down to the difficulty of, I tried for years to get traditionally published, and it just came down to the fact that I didn't have enough online presence. I didn't have a pre-built-in audience, and so publishers didn't want to consider me because there's so many other works of fiction that are in their words in the same categories, which is perfectly fair and understandable. So the other route was self-publishing, and I was like, yes, I could self-publish, but you almost need a team or a lot of expertise and also time and money to be able to invest in to do that properly, or just get lucky and win the lottery. And I ran the numbers in my head, and I was like, no, this is going to be a lot of work, and I'm not going to enjoy it, and I'm going to have to spend my time being way more of a business person than I want to be, and not as much of a creative. And I'm fully down, and I love the business process. But anything that I do, I like to do collaboratively. I'm very much an extrovert, and I love to work with lots of creative people. And working alone is just like a small version of a personal hell. So I was like, if I'm gonna go the direction of having to essentially carry on my back the business side instead of shelling it out to a company or some other source and just hoping and praying that they decide to do something with it, then I'm going to put together my own team, and I'm going to work with people instead of doing it on my own. And then it came down to just figuring out how I was going to do that. And I tried a couple different things before I finally landed on this, which actually originally wasn't even my idea. It was my best friend Paige's idea. We've been partners in crime as far as collaborating on all kinds of crazy stuff, including she edited my books for 10 years. And she was just like, hey, you love D&D. Hey, you love like telling stories. Hey, you love being an entrepreneur and like working with people. Why don't you just mix all three and make a TNT? I can't say words because I'm dyslexic. Gosh darn it. A TTRPG. Those are the words. A TTRPG podcast. And I was like, I should have thought of this years ago. I don't know why I didn't. Thank you.
So would you say like that conversation with Paige was the pivotal moment when you decide, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start this podcast. And then what happens?
Oh, yeah, it was definitely a pivotal moment. It was the pivotal moment of you step on the gas, you fly off the edge of the cliff, and you're like, I haven't hit the ground yet. I wonder how long I can sail for. And you just hang on. And I've been sailing since, and I haven't hit the bottom. So what happens next? I keep flapping my wings, or my arms, and we'll see what happens next. I'm here, so, I mean, that worked.
Amazing. Okay, I did want to ask you, there's something very unique about D20 Tales. At least in matters of like, if I'm doing a comparison for a second with other productions. So my audience knows me as a creator who publishes a lot of interviews with the D20 crew. And the original D20 crew wasn't like, it was born as part of the College Humor team. And they already knew each other and they already worked with each other doing sketches and stuff. So the connection was very natural. But in D20 Tales, you hired a team of people to play as PCs in the various campaigns. And I'm so curious about the process of creating a team and the process behind hiring people to create stories with you. So can you elaborate about the process of hiring people and like, how did you come up with the process? I mean, what were your like criteria? Like, share the process.
Okay, I'm going to start jumping around all over the place. If you at any point want to decide to direct some of this energy, then good luck. No, I mean, I'll play along, but...
Great. Awesome. We're going in a good direction.
So the process. I'm going to jump around a lot and hit a lot of things really fast because there's so much to get into and way more than we could get into today. But essentially, when Paige and I put this together, we were like, okay, we're going to need... because we did a different project before that was the Struggle for Meaning, that was basically based on interviewing people based on exactly that, their struggle for meaning, which is a whole other story in production. And then we're like, okay, we need a bigger team. We need more people. We need like a production team and we need a cast to do this. So we put out interviews and we put out auditions. And then for the first thing that just shocked me is the sheer volume of people who were interested, who applied, or who auditioned, who were exceptionally skilled and talented. I kind of like had only watched at that time period, like I spent like 6 months of research, and I'd like researched so many like big and small creators in the space and watched so many stuff, but it never really occurred to me that they would all knock on my door, that so many of them would be just like so willing to be involved. And I just had a huge influx. Paige and I spent, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, it's a little fuzzy in my brain, like auditioning and interviewing people. Just the first initial, we did multiple waves, was like a 10-minute meeting, and we had those pretty much from like dusk till dawn, like every single day for weeks. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating, and we met so many people. It was crazy. Eventually, I had to just shut off auditions because there was so many applications and so many auditions coming in that we just couldn't handle the volume. And it's like, if I put any more people on our plate, then we won't be able to give the people we have due diligence, and that won't be fair to them, and they've already invested time and effort. So I had to shut that down. yeah, it was crazy with multiple rounds we went through, like a bunch of different stuff. To hit it quick and dirty really fast, the first order of business was actually with the initial stage, wasn't even to test their qualifications or if they were right for the position or if they had the skill sets that we needed or anything else like that. The first thing that we did in screening people is we screened out everybody who didn't have the ideals, the character, essentially, that we wanted to work with. We wanted to ensure that we were working with people who were the type of people who we'd love to see and work with every single day, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years from now. The type of people who you're excited to see, passionate to work with. The type of people who are team players. The type of people who, I don't want to disparage any individuals here, but the type of people who aren't high risk for becoming a diva, because I don't want to create, I've grown up with too many stories of people who get a platform and then abuse that platform. And I feel a huge amount of personal responsibility to never create a monster or give a platform to a monster. I obviously don't have complete control over that, and I pray the day never comes, but it's something that I was actively aware of. Is I wanted wholesome people who had strong character. We weren't invested. We didn't even want to screen people for competence or skill set or talent or anything like that or background before we decided they were the type of person who we wanted to work with and were willing to give a platform to, because we didn't want their skills or background or anything like that or talent to cloud our judgment and influence that. So that was the first round. And then after that, then it was establishing skill sets. It was establishing, it was playing D&D. I got to run the same D&D one shot an ungodly amount of times with a bunch of different people, and discovered that if it's not the same people, and even if it is the same people, you'll never get the same result. It was interesting because I didn't actually truly get sick of running the same one shot over and over again, because we had wildly different people from all over the world and every time zone you can imagine, from every corner of the globe, and let's just say everybody plays a little bit different, and those differences compound, and when you put them in a room with other people, well, we all know the story. It's an age as old as time. It's a hoot, and we're off. Like, no one can predict that shit.
You covered the process.
Okay.
You talked about screening. You talked about doing a one shot, and I would say, do you want to say more about the decision making of getting the team together? After you screened people,
right.
Now it was time to form a team, and then what happens?
Yeah, we formed a team. So essentially, in the last stages of the process, it came down to. And I didn't really tell them this necessarily at the time, but it came down to less about who had the skill sets, because we had a huge group of people, way more than we could take on, who had skills, who had charisma, who were great, wholesome people that I was really, really essentially getting attached to, really growing a fondness for all of these people. There were so many of them. And it came down to who are the people who I feel like need this the most, who are the people who want this the most, who are the people, and who are the people who the ones who get along with each other. A lot of it came down to, at the end of the wire, which ones have good chemistry with each other, because we really want that chemistry. And for also them to it's also really important, not just that I like everybody that I work with and want to see them every day, but they also want to see me and each other every day, because, they also do have to do that. So that's kind of where the wire came down to. And then from there, it was figuring it out. I've had experience in production, and by experience, I mean I've worked on set and on and off and behind the scenes, in front of and behind the camera, in all sorts of different mediums of media. But I've never been a full-on production manager. I've been production assistants. I've been a crew for big theater productions. I've worked around it enough to be familiar, but not enough to have like the hard skills, more a lot of the soft skills and a general idea of what direction to go in. So it really just came down to figuring it out. And we're still figuring shit out every day, because the one thing about production that I think is the biggest lesson for anybody to take home, I would say this to anybody who's interested in doing this, or really any entrepreneurial venture in the future, is not about going into it and having the answers. You obviously want to try to put in the work to show up and have an idea what's going to happen and what problems you're going to run into and how to circumnavigate those. You always want to put in that effort and work. And guess what? That's only going to save you from so many things. So the biggest thing with production I want to drive home is expect that there will be roadblocks. Expect that will be a constant, unending stream of problems that will come your way, that will seem difficult, and they will seem like the end, but none of them are. Because so many of them, you just have to find creative solutions and push through, or accept that it's not going to be exactly what you want and then pivot and adjust. But if you gain that flexibility and that drive to push through it, you will always be amazed at what you can do. And it will inspire more creativity in you. And you may not end up exactly where you thought you would be, but you'll end up somewhere. But it takes patience. And it takes drive. And I'm not talking about like the American ideal of like the toxic work ethic in which it's like put in 100 hours a week and wake up at 5. I say as a total hypocrite, because I do put in sometimes, often anywhere from 90 to 100 hours a week. But anyway, that's not, I'm not saying you have to do that or you should do that. But what I'm saying is what's far more important than that is just not letting those problems stop you. Finding a solution or making your peace with it and moving past and moving through it. And if you do that, you'll be unstoppable. Yeah. Because the biggest thing I've learned in life is unsolicited advice that nobody asked for here. But the biggest thing I've learned in life is that most of the people who succeed don't succeed because they're the best or the fastest or the smartest or the prettiest. Some people do. Some of those people do. And those people do get a lot of attention. But most of the people who succeed, who don't make a lot of fanfare about it, succeed because they failed until everybody else stopped getting up and they were the last one standing.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Also, I feel like a lot of people with projects and stuff like that, they would succeed if they would just accept that they need to hire people smarter than themselves.
Yeah, that's a great piece of input. I would say my personal number one skill is not being good at any particular thing other than the one thing of finding and inspiring people to work together who are better at just about anything than I am at anything. Find people who are better than you. Find people who are smarter than you. Find people who know shit you don't know. If you have the judgment to discern which people are good people and how to motivate those people and when to listen to them, then and when to humble yourself and when to draw a line and a boundary, that's what leadership is. Leadership isn't being better than your team at anything other than leading your team and letting your team lead you.
Yes. Okay. Now that we discussed a bit about the team building and all that, that was the beginning of the project. Now I have a question about like the dark moments. You've had like a year now to work on this project, and I can't imagine that starting a project like this was easy. So tell me a bit about like the low points. Did you ever like doubt that this was going to rise from being a new channel with 0 subscribers on any platform on the internet to what it is today?
Oh, yeah. Every day, all the time, constantly. I'm constantly plagued by doubt. But I still have an underlying backbone of certainty in there. Not that I won't fail, but that failure won't stop me. I know that I will fuck shit up. I know that I will make bad judgment calls. I know that mistakes will happen. I know things that are completely outside of my control, of life just being unfair, will screw me over again and again and again. And it's tough. It's really tough. But what I do know about myself and also about the people that I've put my trust in for this team is that whatever happens, we'll get up and we'll have each other and we'll figure out a solution and we'll move forward from there.
Amazing.
I'm assuming you want to hear some specifics about some specific dark moments, though?
If you want to share.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'm going to start with the first big one, the first big dark moment for me, the first thing that was really tough that made me ask myself, do I really want to do this? Am I the right person to do this? Am I qualified to do this? Do I have any right to do this to other people? Do I have any right to do this to myself? Am I a good person if I'm doing this at all? Is the audition process, is because I spent those weeks getting to know so many good people, so many good, wholesome people who wanted this so bad, who desperately wanted a place and had been putting so much time and effort and work into it and really belonged here. They deserved to get credit. They deserved to have a place on the team. They deserved for life to recognize their efforts and their achievements and their sacrifices. And so many of them they just really needed it. They needed the break. They needed a place. They needed a family in the space. And I couldn't give it to everybody. That's actually the reason why we have 2 shows right now instead of 1, is because I couldn't bring myself to cut it down to just enough for 1 show. So I was like, we'll do 2 shows. Yay! That's kind of how I got past that. But it just got, the hardest thing about that was so many people who I got to know on a deep personal level and how much they cared and how much they wanted this, to have to look at them and cut them down to a bunch of data points on a spreadsheet and then X out their name and then get on a video call and look them in the eyes and in the nicest, politest way possible. But it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you're still saying those words that you're going to kill their dream. Maybe not forever, but for today. And if they've gone through 2 weeks of auditions and are on the 3rd or 5th stage of the process, and they've invested so much time and investment into your community and built relationships with other people that you know and with you, and you know what their struggles are in life, you know what they want, and you have to look them in the eye, into their very soul, and say, no, I can't take you. Bye.
That's tough.
That hurt. That hurt a lot. And that made me really ask myself a lot of hard questions about, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? What do I plan to accomplish? What are my responsibilities to my team, but also to the people who I leave behind?
Yes. Okay. So I want to talk to you about D20 Tales' unique visuals and also the way you edit the episodes. There's something very interesting about in traditional or in other productions that people might be familiar with, people are sitting together on the table, and when there is something that relates to another character, that character can hear the conversation and maybe react or something like that. But in D20 Tales, there are a lot of disconnected pieces of storytelling. Is that a part of your storytelling process? How you connect pieces of story together? What's behind the decision to not do a one round where all of your players are playing together?
I'm a little confused by the question. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by disconnected and all playing together?
Disconnected, I mean I'll give an example. There's a scene with Rosaura and Obi in the market, and then there's elsewhere in name of town, and then there's.
So you're essentially saying in normal campaigns, there's a tendency to always have the whole party in one place all the time. And in my campaign, the party splits up and does a bunch of crazy stuff and has their own side stories that feed into the main story and breaks off and joins up. And because One thing that I think I took in, I know because it was in my own head, but one thing that I took into really heavily into the process when I first was formulating the idea for this show is I wanted it to feel more real than traditional D&D. Traditional D&D is great. I love traditional D&D. But people like Critical Role and so many other great creators out there, and like Adventure Zone and like Abria Iyengar and stuff like that, play D&D where you feel like you're sitting at a table with your friends. You feel like you're sitting at a table with your buds, and it feels very connected in that way. And it feels very much like you're just a silent member sitting at the table watching your friends play. And I love that feel. And they do a phenomenal job of that. And I don't want to compete with them because they do a much better job. So it was like, I'm going to carve out my own niche. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's phenomenal. It's great. And it's paved the way for shows like mine and so many other great creators. And so many more, like a wave of much more diverse creators to now start entering the space, which I think is phenomenal for the space and its health overall and for the community. But I don't want to compete with what Critical Role or Dimension 20 or The Dark Dice or so many other shows or Adventure Zone is trying to do. I want to do my own thing. And so, while though that's phenomenal, I wanted to focus on a more story-driven aspect. I wanted to create something that felt more real, which is why the characters also have so many conflicts and why they move around so much as moving pieces, is because that's more how like life works. The party isn't always in the same place in unison. They have their own ideas, their own ideals, their own backgrounds, and their own stories. And we want to cut back and forth between where they are in the present and telling the story of how they became the way they were. And also sometimes the party separates, and I don't stop my party from separating. I just let them do it and then hit them with the DM hammer. And then, like true parties, they never learn their lesson, which means I always get to whack-a-mole again. So that's a good time. But, it's also, like I mentioned, inter-party conflict. The reason why we have so much conflict with party members is because we invested so much time and effort into their backgrounds and their characters and their ideals and the things that they think, like politically and philosophically and religiously and culturally, the propaganda they've ingested when they're growing up that's unique and different to each of their characters from where they are in the world, which means that I don't have to give them prompts. I can just put them in a room and they'll find reasons to fight, like people who don't agree and like think different things and have different backgrounds and experiences. Like there's so many great moments where like something comes up, anything comes up, political, philosophical, religious, anything like that, economic, and like they'll just start fighting because they all have totally different ideas and perspectives. And I think that reflects an element of reality that is much more raw and real while still being told through the medium of D&D 5e. And I want to be completely true to the mechanics of D&D 5e, but not necessarily true to the parameters for how it was intended to be played solely with a group of friends, because I think we're trying to do something different here. The reason why our episodes are so much shorter and so much chopped up is because we want to be respectful of people's time, and we want to give them a compelling narrative that moves forward in a meaningful way in every single episode and respects their time and respects their investment and gives them something to invest in and care about.
Okay. I love that. And also, when I looked at the playlist for season 1 and season 2, I was like, okay, I can do this, because seeing episodes of an hour and a half, in your mind, it's like, okay, this is doable. But if you go now for Critical Role, the Critical Role, each episode is like 5 hours or 3.5 hours or something like that. It's tough. And I know that I do have a few Critical Role fans in my audience now after one of those interviews. So don't come at me. I'm still trying to make it happen. Okay.
If I meet Matt, I'll mention you if I can. I'll be like, hey, I have somebody who's trying to make a check mark on this. Interview you.
Amazing. I'll remember that. Okay. So there was a fun video on the channel, like a vlog type video from July, where the team met, and I think it was a Dallas, Texas thing. And I find it like so amazing that you created content, you published videos for a year, and you met with the team like only a month ago. So like, how was it to like work with the team and then like only meeting them in person like now after you've done so much together? So what's the dynamic?
So the dynamic is that I run the business almost exclusively through Discord, like a true professional. Yeah, we just have a very elaborate evolving Discord server that we run the team through, and it's the added benefit of like video call and stuff like that makes it so much easier. The internet is a truly an amazing and phenomenal and also double-edged sort of a dangerous tool. But the amazing thing about that is how many opportunities it creates, not just for me, but for people around the world to do crazy stuff like this. Because we have a team member in Australia. We have a team member in the UK. We had for a time some team members, and we had one in Germany. We had some in like South America. We have them all over the continental United States. And it's amazing. Like, it didn't feel like I'd never met these people in person. It didn't feel like I didn't know them. Like, I really got to know them well and trust them well. But meeting them finally for the first time at Fan Expo, where we put on 3 live shows and 4 live panels in the same weekend, was amazing and phenomenal and also exceptionally exhausting. But not because the people were exhausting, but because we all signed up for to bite off way more than we could chew. But the team kicked it out like a champ. But yeah, 7 events in a weekend for one expo. I probably wouldn't do that again.
That's amazing.
Like 3 live shows, 4 live panels. I think I'd probably be like maybe like 3 to 4 things a weekend. Maybe 3. I think 3 is good. Wow. But like 7 was a lot. 7
events in a weekend is a busy weekend.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot of prep too.
Okay, we'll talk about prep in a second. I have a fan question about it. But I do want to ask you about the cinematic value of your episodes. There's something, I love the fact that there's like effects, and you're using a software called Questline, and there's also like the video where you have like the backgrounds change according to the actual storytelling that happens. Like, can you explain a bit about how this style evolved as part of your production?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I went into this, and as we've scaled it over the course of the year, you'll see, like, the big over-the-ear basket headphones have disappeared. Seeing the mics on camera have disappeared. We have the backgrounds that show the setting of the character. Like, we have music and sound effects and visual effects and like the battle map and everything like that. And then, of course, the big thing is we cut out a lot, pretty much all of the out of character stuff, unless it's really great wholesome moments or just funny stuff where people are doing out of character. But a lot of that does get cut. And we cut back and forth between the person who's talking more like a movie, because I want this to feel like I'm not going for, like I said, like Critical Role's territory or so many other shows' territory, where it just feels like a casual game you rolled up to. They're doing too good at that. I don't want to compete. I want this to feel like basically like a Netflix show. I want this to feel like a TV show that you're watching, but just it has the added component of the unpredictability of that it's not scripted. People are playing in a game, and it goes in weird directions, like unpredictable things happen. And I want to bring those in kind of a middle ground in between those elements together to give people a more cinematic experience that's more respectful of their time. My goal is to get episodes eventually to be under an hour.
Okay, so I have a couple of fan questions for you, but before we go there, I want to ask you one important question. Now, in 2022, in August 2022, you've created multiple seasons of the show. and you created, there's like a lot of things that I didn't even discover on the channel yet. You did game shows, I saw, and like a lot of things, a lot of content. If you had to start everything today from zero, what would you do differently?
I think the biggest thing that I would do differently is that, and maybe I'm throwing myself under the bus here, and I shouldn't say these types of things, but I am a chronic oversharer, and I always say more than I'm supposed to and less than I'm supposed to. So let me dig myself a hole here real quick. But the biggest thing that I've learned, because spending so much time in this space, is I went into it with the mindset of, like, even the first question we asked people, like in the interview, the first initial interview was, how do you feel about the word inclusivity? And we used that first starter question because we kind of did some testing, and we found out that it was like, do you support inclusivity, or questions like that? People tend to tip their answers a lot more because they want the position, and they're less. But if you just say, how do you feel about the word inclusivity? What people's opinions, true opinions, tend to come out a lot more organically, and that lets you filter out some knuckleheads. But like, I came onto this with the mindset of, like, wanting to create better inclusivity and more opportunities, but I didn't fully understand how to properly do that, the right way to do that, a fair way to do that. And making an effort isn't the same as doing the right thing. And I don't think that I necessarily did anything bad or wrong, but I do think that I didn't do things as optimally as I could. And if I went back with the lessons that I've learned, because there's been so many great and wholesome, positive people in the space who very gently pulled aside and been like, hey, I see what you're trying to do. Maybe try this instead. Maybe do this instead. There's so many people in the space who are just really good at educating people in a very gentle and helpful way, especially considering I grew up from a very let's just say not very inclusive background in a not very inclusive small bubble of the world. And I've been clawing my way out of that bubble for ever since I essentially, like, graduated high school and moved out. But good intentions do not spell good results, and they don't spell the right thing. And I think the biggest thing, I know that the biggest thing that I would do differently is take all the lessons that people have taught me and all of the things that I have learned and make an effort not just to run auditions and casting calls that are fully inclusive of anybody who comes in, but instead make an effort to find people where they are. Because I've learned so many things about the space that you kind of, like, know intuitively on an instinctual level, but when somebody mentions it, it's like, oh, yeah, I didn't think, I should have thought about that. And maybe that's my privilege showing. But the fact is like, what I didn't understand is just putting all those opportunities out there and listing those things doesn't necessarily mean that minorities or people who've been discriminated against feel safe, feel comfortable. They don't, they need to know that you care and that you're willing to accept them, because just saying, like, this is an inclusive interview, everybody can apply, doesn't necessarily make sure they feel welcome in a space where they know they haven't been welcome for a long time. And I've just learned so many lessons about reaching people and minorities where they are. And I'm by no means an expert, and I'm learning more every day. And I wouldn't say that anybody necessarily has anything to learn from me, but I still have so much to learn from the space. But that's a big thing for me, is essentially the thing that I would change is not just going in with good intentions, but going in better informed.
Okay. That's a really insightful answer. That's good. Okay, now I have a few fan questions for you. What were your primary inspirations in creating the stories for Emissaries and Heralds?
Primary inspirations. I'm going to out a little bit of the stick of the show. But my biggest inspiration for both of those shows are, I've seen so many versions of, like, the hero's journey and so many versions of, like, the chosen one. And I hate, like, I love Star Wars. I love Lord of the Rings. I love so many, like, shows like that. But the thing that irks me, maybe this is so much Lord of the Rings, maybe that's a bad example, so let me backtrack on that one a little bit. Not completely, though. But the thing that really irks me about those shows is the idea, or those books or those stories, is that like Aragorn needs to rise to his destiny because he was born from a lineage of kings. Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker, depending on how you want to slice and dice it, and that is a conversation Star Wars fans will crucify me over and argue till the ends of the earth about like which one's technically the chosen one or if it's somebody else entirely. But the idea of that somebody needs to save the world. Somebody needs to make what's right in the world. Somebody is picked based on their birth or their background. And so I'm kind of outing part of the reveal of the show here. But I never liked it, and that never sat well with me, because I always ask myself the question of like, sure, if I put myself in the fantasy of imagining myself to be the chosen one, then it feels great. But what if I'm not? What if it's somebody else? Then how do I feel? How do people feel who aren't included? And I think that was the beginning of the thing that made me sensitive to the idea of inclusion with minorities when that conversation first came up when I moved away and went to college, is the idea of how does it feel to be excluded? How does it feel to be left out? If you're not the chosen one, how does everybody else in that story feel other than the white male protagonist? And it, not good. It doesn't feel good. It's not good. It's not treating people fair. And I don't like the idea of a story in which just because somebody's predestined to be chosen because of their birth or their background or where they come from, the premise that they're going to save the world and responsibility rests on their shoulders and everybody else is helpless. It's like, no. The world is saved by a collaborative effort of people. And so the big thing for these stories is, and a lot of other stories that I tell, is I want to deconstruct the chosen one trope. I want to deconstruct the chosen one premise and tell a story that shows that no matter where you're from or what your background is, that's not what makes you great. What makes you great are the decisions you make, the choices you make, and more importantly, who you do it with. Because history has a horrifyingly oversimplified tendency to take one singular person and put them up on a pedestal and say, this person is responsible for this great thing. But behind that person is countless untold and unrecognized individuals who propped them up, who supported them, who put in the work, who a lot of times they took credit for a lot of their work and a lot of their effort. And nobody wins alone. And our strength as people doesn't come from being alone. We're a pro-social species, and our strength comes from the relationships around us. And so that's the story that I want to tell, is I want to deconstruct the concept of the chosen one premise and tell stories about collaborative victory, tell stories about triumph and sometimes failure, but doing it together, doing it as people, leveling the playing field, showing that it's not where you come from or who you are or what runs in your veins or a prophecy that makes you great. And you can come from those things and be great, but it has nothing to do with where you came from and everything to do with who you are on the inside and the choices you make.
Amazing. That's so good. And I also want to applaud you for saying all that without spoilers. So congratulations.
Yeah, there's a few times you could tell I was like stopping. I was like, I'm going to bite my tongue, swallow it a few times, but I'll get there.
Okay. Now, the question that I am really excited for. What does your prep for a session look like? How long does it take you to prep?
Right. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is to anybody listening to this, do not compare my prep to your prep, because all different versions of, I'm not smart enough to say all preps are created equal, because I've definitely met some unequal preps, but if your prep is working for you, that's great. Do you. Don't compare yourself to me or anybody else. Do what works for you. You can draw inspiration and notes and ideas from other people, but don't compare your prep to my prep. All that to say, my prep is enormous for sessions. There are so many plot threads that need to be pulled together, so much character stuff, and I don't even do it alone. I spend probably around, per episode, and we record 2 episodes on Saturday. So it's about 15 to 20 hours of prep per episode. And then on top of that, I have a writing meeting with Brian, who I essentially run through all the stuff that I'm planning and doing, and then he picks it apart and pokes all the holes in it. And he's a very polite, collaborative way of doing that. But he's like, did you think about this? Did you think about this? What about the consequences of this? What happens when they do and doing this and this? And the unique thing about prepping those storylines is you can't just be like, it's not like writing the next chapter in a novel where like, okay, this is what's going to happen. You have to focus on creating opportunities for the players themselves to tell a compelling story based on the backgrounds that they've created for themselves or you've created with them. And that's the beautiful element of collaborative storytelling. And the trust that I put into my performers in every single episode where we sit down to record is that I'm going to give them all of this. I'm going to put in all this prep, and they're going to make something beautiful out of it. And even though it's going to look like that, the thing is, I want to make it look as close to, and that not necessarily scripted, but as maybe scripted is the word, but as close to a polished storyline as we can get it. But doing that through organic collaboration. And they all have such good instincts most of the time. But, they're playing D&D. Sometimes they just have some fun, and we have some fun with it. And that's okay, and we allow those storylines and tangents to happen. For a sitting down and recording session, which is almost always 2 episodes, about 30 hours of individual prep, and then about 3 to 6 hours of prep with Brian Henry, lead writer. And then probably around half hour to 20 minutes of prep with Caleb, my younger brother, who makes all the maps, and then sometimes prep with other team members, things like balancing monsters, putting together tokens for NPCs and stuff like that. So all in all, I'd say probably 50 hours as far as my prep goes, but then other members of the team prep other things as well. So, but that's why I said at the beginning, don't compare your prep to my prep, because I do this full time, all day, every day. So, which is not fair to compare what you're doing to it, because at its core, and you might have to bleep this word out, but at its core, essentially, what we're creating is D&D, so that's also further of the thing of like what we're doing isn't trying to be reflective of what people have on their table. It's trying to be reflective of what the furthest max we can get as far as storytelling goes out of the medium. Like, I love the concept of organically creating a story where it has unpredictability and one individual person doesn't have the end-all be-all say on how it ends up. And you can see it being created live.
Okay. Let me add in a little question there. Like, so you talked about prep, and how does your character gen session look like? Like when you sit with a PC for the first time. So do they they come with the initial character and then you polish it together, or how does that work?
Sort of, kind of. That's a great question. So the way it works is it's similar to use Scrap. You're actually pretty close to the money there. So what we do is I give them I essentially recorded a several-hour lecture of me explaining the basics of the world, and then we wrote up a huge 30 plus or 40 or 60, I don't honestly know how many pages it is, page document about breaking down all the different countries in the world and their cultures and their backgrounds and their beliefs and their religious and political backgrounds and stuff like that. A lot of the basics as far as what anybody who lived in this world would know about the world. And that's a lot of homework, but obviously this is for what we're going for. We can assign homework. Normal DMs don't give your players, probably not, unless they really ask for it, a 60-page document and a 4-hour lecture about your world building. They probably don't want to consume that. But we sent them off to consume that because I wanted them to get a good idea of all the different countries and places in the world. And then I told them, pick 3 places that you would want to be from that resonate with you, and then pick 3 different character classes that you're interested in playing, and then pick 3 different types of characters that you're interested in playing. And so they essentially came with like 9 different options that we can mix and match. And then me and Brian Henry sat down for our first character meeting and said, okay, let's talk about each of these. And we talked through all of them, see which ones resonate, which ones work with the potential storyline, and then we collaboratively pick each of those 3 of like, okay, you want to like why do you want to be from this part of the world? What resonates with you from this part of the world? What resonates with you with this character? What synergies do these different combinations have? And then we kind of link and log those things together to create the outline of their character. And then that's the first character meeting. Then we have follow-up character meetings to determine their background, their history, all the things they've been through. They work with me and Brian to like write essentially their character origin and history and all the stuff they've done previous to where the show begins. And then the last sessions are about exploring the psychology of the character and the way it thinks, and I'll throw all kinds of tough questions at them. Like, if you're in this moral situation, how does your character make a decision? Like, what is your character's desires? What do they hate the most about themselves? What do they want the most in the world? What's the thing that they're lacking in their life? And like, what would it take for them to fall in love? Which it typically stumps a lot of people, which I think is interesting because almost all of them give the same version of the same answer. So many people get stumped by that question, but I always get almost an identical answer, which is some variation of people just want to be seen and heard and understood for who they are and not judged for that.
Okay, amazing. Like, I love the questions part because like there's also like those character in writing, like when you create a character for a story, like what does your character always carry in their left pocket? Like, right. What do they always have in their wallet and stuff like that? So it's like questions that on a surface level, they could feel like a little bit of shallow, but they also like help you develop a better understanding for yourself of the character that you're going to essentially live in for a campaign.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, now I have a question for you, which I will challenge you to answer it without giving spoilers. Okay. If he had to change one of the main villains from any of the shows, who would it be, and how would he make them different?
I think I know who's asked this question. I have a guess, but I'm not going to guess. But I think I know who it is. Okay, what would if I was going to change something about one of the villains of the show, which one would I change and what would it be?
Yes.
Oof. See, that's tough because there's a couple different villains I can't say anything about because that would be a spoiler. And some where I don't want the audience to have a clear idea of whether or not they're actually a villain because I like the ambiguous gray lines. But but to answer that question, if I was going to change one thing about a villain in the show, it would be Thorn. I would change a little bit about their character introduction. I wouldn't change their motives or their goals, but I would change the way in which I introduced their character.
Okay.
The way in which I introduced their character was intended to fake people out and make them feel like it was just a stereotypical two-dimensional, like a bit bad, scary demon villain thing, which I at the time I felt like was interesting, but in hindsight, in context of the greater story that I'm telling, I think it would have been a stronger first episode to have revealed that the villain was more complex than that.
Okay, and I will stop you from giving any more details because I'm going through season 1 right now. Right. So don't spoil it for me, Russell.
Okay, well then, going into season 1, just remember all the villains are super cookie cutter and two-dimensional. You're good.
Okay. Great. These were all the fan questions. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you, what does the future hold for D20 Tales?
I have a professional answer and a personal answer. I'm going to give my professional answer first. The professional answer as the person who's essentially show running and responsible for the rest of the team is what it holds is my driving force and factor is obviously I like it's just an ongoing thing that I want to entertain people and I want to bring value into their lives and teach lessons, but in ways that leave people to make and draw interpretations for themselves as to the values of those lessons instead of ramming my personal ideology down their throat. But I'd say I feel almost more personal responsibility than that to set a good example and to take care of the people who are investing in this, the team. I want to turn this as quickly as I can into their full-time careers because I want to give them the life pursuing their passion as a career that they've always wanted, that they've always dreamed of. I really want to fulfill those dreams for them and provide them that opportunity. So from a production standpoint, I want to get us filming in person and paying everybody's bills as soon as we can. And I realize that's like we have to make money answer, but money does grease the wheels and people need money. People need money to meet their needs, and I want to meet their needs, and I want to take care of my team, and I want to pay them far more than is fair. I want to pay them generously, and I want to bring access and opportunity into their life while they're doing what they love and what they're passionate about. So what's in the future? Monetization of our show, brand deals, as much as like I like I'm the problem we've been facing is I'm like too selective and nitpicky because like every single opportunity that comes up, I'm like, okay, but I researched this company and 6 years ago they did this shady shit and I'm not a fan. And so like it gets really tough. And at some point I have to draw the line and stop morally grandstanding on dying on every single hill. But so brand deals and ads and videos and pitching. Yeah, and merch. We're working on a merch store. I've been working on a merch store for like a month. We put a lot of time and effort into it, and I'm just like dragging my feet on actually releasing it. But yeah, a bunch of stuff like that. That's the professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, like me as a person, what's in the future of the company? To be super frank and honest, I have no fucking idea.
That's such a great answer. I was like expecting you to say that. I love this.
Am I that predictable already?
No, that's so good. Yeah, wow, amazing. That's an amazing point to end this interview on. The future is open and amazing for D20 Tales. I am so impressed. I love this already. I didn't realize that I would like sit and listen for episode after episode. So that's amazing. And thank you so much for your time and for your candid answers. This was so much fun.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, too. I really appreciate you bringing me on here and lending your voice to promoting us and putting some semblance of a stamp of endorsement behind us ragtag group of knuckleheads trying to pass as hyper-professional. But also just the time that I've spent here with you, like this has genuinely been a fun and engaging conversation. Like my interactions previous to this online with you have been very professional while also threading the line of also being very like wholesome and personable. And I think you thread that line well, and I think it'll take you places. And I think you're really doing something here that has value to people, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I also wanted you to tell my viewers where they can find D20 Tales, and what can you say to convince them to start watching the show with me?
Okay. Appreciate the opportunity for the pitch. Now let me fall flat on my face. Remember the thing I mentioned about failing more times than anybody else? I'm just racking up my scorecard here. But anyway, D20 Tales. This is going to come as a huge shock to everybody listening. But the place to find D20 Tales is if you type in D20 Tales on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. or Reddit, which we're doing nothing with our Reddit, but we have it. So don't go there. Go to Twitter or probably YouTube where you could watch our show. Then, find us, D20 Tales. It's that easy. You'll see my knucklehead face and the knucklehead faces of all of the other great people on the cast, and some of the crew kind of poke their heads around sometime too. As far as a pitch to get you to watch it, I feel like if I haven't said enough in this interview to convince people that this is the type of thing that they want to watch, then it's probably not the show for them, but that's okay. But if anything that I've said has interested you, then just ask yourself, what do I have time? Do I have an hour to 90 minutes in a week or so to watch a show that's very different from the rest? We're not trying to do the same thing. We're trying to be respectful of your time. We're trying to tell a story that has a satisfying arc in every episode, that is very plot driven, where the plot is driven just as much by each of the characters as it is by the DM. And so if you want to get a little taste of chaos and also be on the edge of your seat, because we're definitely more of the dark fantasy, then maybe we're a place for you. And we have a great wholesome community who is really positive and very active and likes each other and gets along. So if you want a great community, then show up. If you want to make trouble, then there's other places in the internet. Fine, you can find your way around. I'm sure you will. But yeah, so other than that, I'll say chaos. I say this line at the end of most episodes: chaos awaits you in the dark. And if you want to know what that means, turn up. And I'll tease that one for a while before I tell you.